How's that? Thanks for a heads up, Ryan. Yeah, I missed that. And Berserker, yes, no sound. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. I turned the music off and didn't forget to turn the microphone on. So, little hiccups here and there. I'm still learning this stuff. Get this stuff off my screen so I can see what's going on. Okay, good. Thank you, Ryan's good now. So, I hope everybody's had a good week so far. It's Tuesday night again. Mine was a little bit of a long weekend. We were supposed to be testing the Studebaker on Sunday. That didn't happen. So we'll go over that in a little bit. And I was talking about, just as we realized, you guys let me know that I didn't have the mic on, dummy me, that we're still on the OBS platform for the stream. I haven't gotten the StreamYard activated yet. That's my bad. Just kind of got busy. Been working on a bunch of stuff for the channel. I actually laid out a bunch of t-shirts to put in the merch store soon. So hopefully we'll have that all up and running in a couple weeks here. I think it's going to be pretty cool. Right now I just did some, like sayings and stuff like that. But eventually I want to get a shirt with any of the hot rods that we built, on them that have been on the channel. I think that'd be pretty cool. Where you cars on the channel, you can see a video and you can wear the shirt with it on there. Most of them have been pretty cool cars, so I think that'll be real nice. So that'll be something we're working on. I haven't been so darn busy. I haven't checked myself, but on the channel now there should be some new buttons and stuff around the screen. So next to the name, between the channel name and subscribe, there should be a join button. I haven't gotten the introduction video made for that yet, but basically that's going to be a club that people can join that want to join in the community. There's going to be a lot of extra perks. You get the emojis and badges. I mean, it's kind of more younger people stuff, but I think that it's cool. You gotta put emojis up on the chats and stuff, and there's some stuff, super thanks and stuff like that, where you can help out the channel. So we're getting that stuff going. Of course, getting the merch store going. So we'll have, like I said, we'll have the t-shirts and stuff going. So that's all the things we're working on. Working crazy trying to get all this stuff going. But big thing I want to do is get the new software going, because this one is very cumbersome to use. So I think with the newer software, it'll make it a little easier to show you guys stuff that's going on. So I'm going to be putting another video up on the 4200. It was supposed to be first startup and dyno and possibly track runs, but as I said before, that didn't happen. I did get it all together. I did get the startup done, but after I fired the engine up, I was running it. Let me go ahead and this is going to be the thumbnail for the new video. As you can see there, the engine's out of the car. So that's what I was thinking about using for a thumbnail for the new video coming out. Let me know what you guys think about that. So let me go ahead and show you a little video I did when I had the engine in the car. Alright, so we got the car pushed outside. There's the new coiled packs on the engine. Everything's all assembled. We're ready for first fire up. So I'll
Put the camera back on the mount, prime the oil, and hit the key, see what it does.
Kind of what we were working on.
All right, so
yeah, so like I said, there's the engine completely installed in the car, plumbed and wired. The new coil pack's installed. I'm getting ready to do a fire up on it, and we did get the fire up going. It did run, but I noticed. Well, so I got it running, and it had about 75 pounds of oil pressure. All the gauges looked good. Everything was good. So I did 3 heat cycles to get the rings of seat. So I let it run, get up to temp. Played with checking timing and all that stuff while it was running. Let it cool down. Do it again, and ended up doing it 3 times. So I used that to get the rings to seat into the cylinder walls, because it has a fresh hone and a fresh set of rings. And then that pretty much ended my Thursday. So I figured, okay, Friday we're gonna, work on a little bit of the idle tuning, get it, put it in gear with the trans brake, and work on some boost builder tables, so it builds boost fast, and go to the dyno. That was the plan. And if we didn't make the dyno Friday, we would do it Saturday, and then head over to Leo's in Arcadia on either Saturday night or Sunday morning, and then obviously to Bradenton Sunday for the run day Sunday, and get some runs on the car. So Friday morning comes around, I check all the fluids, everything looks good, no leaks, everything's thumbs up, looks really good. I started up, and I'm kind of glanced at the gauges, didn't really think about it too much because it was running perfectly the day before, and was working on the boost builder tables, and I looked down and I saw that the oil pressure was 40. So that was 30 pounds less than they had before. So I freaked out, shut it off right away, and then spun the oil filter off, cut the filter, and saw a little bit of metal flake in the filter. So I'm like, that's not good. So I went ahead and decided, well, we got to pull it apart and figure out what's going on with this thing. So rolled it back in the shop and pulled the motor back out, got it up on the stand. Saturday morning, I decided to go ahead and pull it apart. And of course, if you guys don't know, we're in South Florida, and it's normally, this time of year, it's normally in the mid to high 80s and 100% humidity or 80% humidity. Well, I go out to the shop that morning, Saturday morning, and it's like, wow, it's kind of warm in the shop. Why? What's going on here? So looked at the thermostat, and it said low battery. So need to set a battery. Put batteries in it, and nothing's working. And I go out back, and the compressor's not on, and not good at all. So Steve says, hey, George, good thumbnail. Sad to hear about the 4200. Well, hang on, listen, follow the story. So Saturday morning, no AC in the shop. Great. So anyway, I got to pull the motor apart. So we pull the motor apart, and had a couple friends hanging out today, and we took the main caps off, took the rod caps off. Bearings look brand new, just like they were when I put them in. Perfect. Obviously, we had the valve cover off. The valve cover, there was no oil, or there's oil in the valve cover, but no metal flake. And so my buddy Mike is rolling his hands around inside the oil pan, and he's like, dude, there's no metal flake. There's nothing in this oil pan. It's spotless in here. The oil looks brand new, like you just poured it in. So, one, that made me feel really good. Hoo-hoo, I didn't mess anything up. But it was very discerning. Why did we have this 30-pound oil pressure variation? Obviously, we called Leo and told him, we're not making Sunday, that's for sure. Because now the all the covers on this engine, the timing cover, the oil pan, the rear main cover, all that stuff is siliconed on. So once you take that stuff apart, there's a major cleanup that needs to be done before you can put it back together. So later that afternoon, I got a call from Leo, and he was thinking about it, what was going on, and he remembered that during Hurricane Ian, now remember he lives in Arcadia, so he was direct path of the storm when it came through. Fort Myers and Port Charlotte and all those areas got flooded heavily. Well, so did Leo. He's got a little acreage there out in the woods, and it seems it didn't look that way before, but after all that rain and water from the storm came, everybody in his neighborhood runs down to his corner of the street. So he ended up with about 2.5 to 3 feet of water in the shop, and of course all of his land was covered. His cars were underwater. He was very thankful I had the Studebaker here because it would have been underwater. But it was a mess. I mean, luckily his house was higher than that. Never went in the house, so they were good for there. But his shop was a disaster, and his original motor that he was in the books that he wrote, the earlier version 6-cylinder, that motor was completely underwater. My open trailer was over there, it was completely underwater. Well, Leo remembered that the dry sump pump was completely underwater. So, and it took probably 2 or 3 days for the water to recede, and of course then their cleanup began. And I don't know if anybody's been through a major storm of any kind, snowstorm, hurricane, anything like that. It's daunting, and you walk around for a couple of days going, where do I start? Because everything's messed up. But anyway, him and his buddy did take the pump, and they did take the hoses off and run oil through it and tried to flush all the water out of it. So, but unfortunately, he did forget to tell me that, so I didn't even think to look at that. So now here it is, the following Tuesday, and the best I can tell anybody, and the best I can think of myself, is I think the pressure regulator in the pump was stuck, because even with them flushing the water out of the pump by hand and everything, you're never going to build any pressure, so it's never going to activate the pressure regulator. So I think that is why the oil pressure was in the high 70s and 80s on Thursday, because I never revved the engine up or anything. I just fired it up, let it run, seating the rings. So I never saw, when you snap the throttle, you'll see the oil pressure jump around. Well, I never saw that because I never did that. And then on Friday, when I actually started working on tuning the car, I think by the heat cycles and all that oil running through the pump, I think the regulator broke loose, and then that's why the pressure was lower, because I remember I have a oil squirter on the thrust bearing, because we had thrust bearing issues. So there's a 40 thousandths orifice shooting oil that we didn't have before, and the bearing clearances are a little looser than what the motor was before. So, that's probably why the oil pressure was a little lower. It just needs to be adjusted, but we didn't know that, and so it is what it is. So the motor's all apart. I've got most of the silicone cleaned up. I got all the fittings out of the block. I'm gonna bristle brush all the oil passages just to verify everything's good, and we'll start putting this thing back together. So hopefully we'll have it back together soon, and except for quite a bit of time, nothing's damaged. So woohoo! Steve says, "Wow, dodged a bullet on expensive stuff." Yeah, it was. Trust me, Friday when I went in the house, the wife looked at me and said, "What is wrong? You look like you lost your best friend." And I told her, I said, I know I checked every, left no stone unturned, dotted every I, crossed every T. But now the engine's got a problem, and I don't know what it is. So, yeah, Friday night was pretty much a sleepless night. So, and then Saturday when we seen that the bearings and everything were fine, I was like, oh, that was a big load lifted. So that is kind of where it goes sometimes, the simplest thing. As far as the bit of metal, and when I say we found metal in the oil filter, it wasn't like the motor was exploded metal. There shouldn't have been any metal in the oil. It was probably enough in there that would look like the first service after a fresh build, because a lot of metals are rubbing against each other and stuff, and so you always get a little bit out on the first filter. But it was metal nevertheless, and it scared the Jesus out of me, and there was no way that I was gonna run this engine anymore without inspecting what the issues were. That would be just totally careless on my part. So we're good. Put it back together, and we'll see where it leads us now. And so, unfortunately, that kind of absorbed a good portion of the week, because Wednesday I was getting all that stuff done, getting the wiring harnesses made for the new coil packs. I made some mounts and stuff so that the coil packs could come off easily. There's a bunch of spacers, and so I put some clips and stuff so that'll all come off without having a 52-piece pickup. So fairly simple 6 screws, and the whole coil pack assembly comes off. Unplug the coils, plug wires, and then that's all good. So that's all looking good. And I was able to go over the valve lash, obviously, since we took the motor back apart. And there's a couple that I have to touch up, but everybody was happy there. We did leak down, and that was all, pretty good. So that was all good. So, all in all, as Steven said, we dodged a bullet. So it's just going to be a couple weeks now till, well, I'm not really even sure when the next event will be that we'll be able to run the car. So I'll keep you guys informed. As soon as I get this back together, I got to jump right on the Smurf, because we have a 4-car shootout in South Georgia Motorsports Park, November 2nd through 4th. I think it's a $25,000 to win 4-car shootout, so definitely got to get that car back together and ready to rock and roll, and go up there and take everybody's money. So that'll be good. But it's going to be a busy couple weeks, and sometime I got to get back on the Chevelle with the wiring harness and and finish up this Camaro. It's so close to being finished, but all this other stuff kind of jumped in its way. Ryan says, how do you remedy the pump? Pull it apart and check it out. Yes, I totally disassembled the pump. I found one little sticky spot in the pressure regulator. You know what? I was going to have pictures of that, and I didn't get that done. But yeah, I took it completely apart, and it's a Moroso pump. So you take each stage apart, they're O-ring together, and then each gear assembly has its own keyway. So you take one, you start at the front pulley, and you work your way to the back. I found little nicks and stuff in the gears, so 400 emery cloth, and did a polish job on all the gears and everything to make it all look nice and clean. Brake cleaned the crap out of it to make sure there was no metal anywhere to be seen in there, and reassembled it. And the pressure regulator feels really good now, so I'm 99.9% sure that was the culprit. I really can't say 100% because I really don't know. It was already free when I took it apart. So that's a little bit of the scary part, but it's mechanical. So if everything does what it's supposed to do, it will all work perfectly. So it should be good. I pulled it all apart, and didn't really find much in it, and flushed all the hoses with brake clean, and I still have to go back and clean the dry sump tank out again. But I think we're going to be good. I think it was just just one of those things that had I had time, I probably should have took the pump apart anyway. I can't blame Leo for not remembering about that. That's not that big of a deal. But typically on a dry sump motor, I go through all. Well, even on a regular motor, I go through the oil pump and everything on the assembly. But a lot of that stuff wasn't here during the time I had the engine tore down, so it wasn't like I had a lot of time to massage all that stuff. So it got missed. I'm only human, so I messed up. Ryan says, I thought you meant a piece of the regulator broke. No. I'm sorry. In the pump, there's a piston with a spring and a set screw on it. And the piston, when the oil pump builds up whatever pressure to overcome the spring pressure, it opens and diverts the oil. So that's how an oil pump controls oil pressure. So it's common practice, like when I do an LS engine, or I do any engine, because I like to run the clearances a little looser than factory. Say factory bearing clearances are 1 to 1.5 thou. To me, that's really scary, because even though the inserts are called bearings, they're not a bearing. They're really just an insert that the oil is the bearing. So when you have the inserts that tight to the crank journals, it's very easy for them to touch down, especially with lightweight oils, high RPM, high oil temperatures when you're tracking a car, whether you're drag racing or road racing. So I like to run the clearances a little looser. A street motor, I want 2.5 to 3 thou. A race motor, I want 3 to 3.5 thou. And so when you open up those clearances, now you need a larger film of oil to make up the difference. And one thing about oil pumps is they pump, but they don't know what pressure is. The pressure is made by the restriction of all the orifices in the motor. Orifices being the difference between the journals on the crank and the cam and the insert bearings, or any other place that oil is going. If you got squirters, piston squirters, or obviously you got oil going through the lifters, the push rods, the valve train. And that's why on race engines we always put restrictors in the engine to control where the volume of oil goes. That way we can control the oil layer between the bearing, the insert, and the journal that it's riding on. So that being said, all I have to do now is, once the motor's back together, is loosen up the set screw and run it in a couple turns, and that will put more pressure on the pressure regulator valve, which then will take more oil pressure before it releases. So we'll adjust it to where we can get about 70 pounds of oil pressure in it. And obviously, as you rev it up, it'll go up a little bit, because the pump, as it goes faster, the pump pumps more volume, and the regulator can only restrict so much, or dump so much. So it's a give and take kind of thing. So on here, how do you remedy the pump pull? Yeah, so I answered that one. So Ryan then said, I think you meant a piece of regular broke. Okay, we went over that. And then I'm running a Peterson on a Vega. Nice to see be able to adjust pressure. Yes. So on your rear stage, where the oil inlet and outlet is, you'll see a jam nut and a long threaded bolt going through. Probably has an Allen in the end of it, and that is your pressure regulator. So in a regular engine, there's nothing adjustable unless it's like a aftermarket pump. So what I didn't mention before, so when I'm opening up the clearances on a street motor or on a race motor, we're running a regular in tank or in pan pump. What I'll do is I'll pull the plug off. That there's a cap or a pin, depending on the oil pump, that allows the regulator spring to come out. What I'll do is I'll put a 60 to 80,000 shim in there, and that gives the spring more tension. Just like if you're shimming a valve spring, you put a valve shim underneath it to tighten the spring up, and that raises the pressure up. So that's what we do. And sometimes, depending on the oil pump, you can even make a oil pump dyno. I don't know if you guys knew that there was such an animal. So you can take the easiest way to do it is you take a bucket with a lid, say like a 5-gallon bucket. That's kind of takes a lot of oil, but say you had a 1-gallon paint jug, and you can mount, say, a small block Chevy, big block Chevy, any of the pumps that mount to the engine block, so they have a flange on them, where you can drill holes in the lid of the the pan that you're going to use, paint can, whatever you're going to use, bolt the oil pump solid to it, with the top having one hose going back into the container, so the oil is returning, because otherwise you'll just run out of oil, and the other one with a pressure gauge. So what you can do then is spin the oil pump with a drill and watch your gauge. As the oil is returning to the pan, it'll show you how much oil pressure it makes. So that's an oil pump dyno. It's something that your high-end engine builders will do. That way they know before they put it together. Now, obviously, on the dry sump like you have, Ryan, you can just go out there on the motor while it's running and adjust it to whatever you want to make it, and it's easy peasy. So John says, good evening, man. Glad you made it. I run a high pressure, not high volume. Right, so on your pumps, there's different things. Obviously, any oil pump can be made high pressure by either replacing the pressure regulator spring or by shimming it. So that's how you adjust the pressure. Just like a turbo wastegate or a blow-off valve or a fuel pressure regulator. It's all the same thing. As you tighten the spring, the pressure goes up. Loosen up the spring, the pressure goes down. So that's just how it works. Then of course they've got volumes, and you do have to be careful with high volume when you are running a single stage in the oil pan pump, because you can suck the oil pan dry. I've seen that on multiple cars. Where the pump is actually pumping so much oil that it actually will run it dry. Now, of course, on a dry sump engine, that's the beauty of the dry sump. You have all these, depending on how many stages you have, but you have 2 or 3 or 4 stages of scavenge. So they're pulling the oil out of the engine and putting it into your dry sump tank, and the oil pump is drawing out of the bottom of the dry sump tank. So you don't usually have as much of a volume issue with the dry sump system unless you're running a really small tank. But you do have to make sure there is sufficient oil in the tank. So that's one of the things on a dry sump. When the engine's running, you'll want to go ahead and look in the tank and see what the oil level is like. Usually on a round dry sump, or any kind of dry sump, there would be usually 2 or 3 baffles in there. And what they're trying to do is get all the oil to not be foamy and go back into a solid, so it can be picked up in the bottom. So usually, if there's 2 to 3 baffles in there, we usually try to keep the oil above the second baffle, and that's usually a pretty good height for keeping the oil pressure continuous. But yeah, like on the LS's are one of the engines. Mellings has a video online, so they have like 4 different LS pumps, and the pumps for the DOD and VVT engines, so that's your Gen 4 LS3s, and even the 5.3s, and any of those Gen 4s that have the DOD, which is displacement on demand, and or the variable valve timing, that is all operated by oil pressure. So that pump pulls a lot more oil. So And I believe the pan may be modified for that, might hold a little bit more oil pressure. But if you put that pump on an LS1 or a 2 that doesn't have any of those functions, you will just pump all the oil into the top of the cylinder heads, and the oil pressure gauge will start fluctuating, and it's because there's no more oil in the pan left. It's sucked it up and blown it up into the engine, and it isn't recovering back to the pan quick enough. So you definitely want to keep an eye on which oil pump you buy. Easy thing is call the manufacturer, like Mellings. They're very knowledgeable about that stuff, and you can go over what you're doing and how many quarts your pan is, and they'll definitely get you set up. Mike is on. He says many have a oil pressure control valve incorporated in the pump. Right. Almost every oil pump will have a pressure regulator. In fact, I can't think of a oil pump that does not have a pressure regulator built in. Some will have 2 stages, but every one that I am aware of will have a regulator, whether it's a single stage in the pan, a single stage belt driven, or dry sump. Any of those systems that I know of all have regulators, and of course any of the externals you can adjust by the set screw. Moroso makes a billet oil pump that you can put a pipe plug in the side of your oil pan, and you can actually adjust that one. It's in the oil pan externally if you modify your pan to do that. But that's oh, I'm sorry, Mike is talking about electric pressure control valve. Well, of course, everything is gone to electric nowadays. All your VVTs and all that stuff's all electric. Now we got electric steering, we got electric air conditioning now. So that's the way of our society now. Excuse me. Yeah, so that's pretty cool with electric, because I mean, as long as the data is good to the ECU will control it properly. But I can imagine, I'm we kind of went around and I have to tell everybody, go to Mike's website, or his Facebook, YouTube channel, Patriot Grease Monkey. So last week we were talking, or I believe it was last week, we were talking about the variable cams and rocker arm assemblies and lifters, and how a lot of that stuff was failing. And Mike brought up the 4-cylinder engines they're working at the dealer, they're having failures. Well, he actually made a little video for us, so anybody that was on the chat last week and heard it, and you wanted to see what he was talking about, he go over to his site, go over to his channel, and he made a little video for everybody. Appreciate that, Mike. It really was crazy. I guess engineers are trying to make their jobs worthwhile, because I don't understand why they're making any of this crap they're putting in these cars, because they are not. I guess they're tested, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Ryan says, can't remember on the 4200 how many scavenge lines does the pan have. There's 4 on Leo's car. We have 4 on that one, and that's because that you kind of want, depending on your engine, but any of the engines that have skirted blocks, so the block hangs lower than the crankshaft, as in LS, the 4200s that way. There's quite a few engines that are like that. Those engines typically will have scavenging issues, because all the oil has to run past the crank, draining back to the pan. So you got a crankshaft that's spinning 6,000-7,000 RPMs, and you got oil draining right next to it. The windage from the crank will draw that oil in, and when you add weight to the crankshaft, you're taking power away. So that's one of the benefits of dry sump. So on a conventional small block, big block Chevy, conventional Fords, a lot of the Chryslers, those blocks are not skirted. So the pan rail stops at the parting line, or the halfway point of the crankshaft. So then you can run an oil pan with kickouts, and that the whole thing for kickouts is that it moves the oil away from the crankshaft as quickly as possible, and you can put oil scrapers in between the pan and the block, and all those things are there to get all the oil off the crank that you can. The other thing is with the dry sump, with all those stages of scavenging, they're sucking all the time. So it's actually putting the engine into a vacuum and drawing the oil to the pickups to try to get it off the crankshaft. Now, I've heard back in the day when they first started doing dry sumps and stuff that they were actually creating so much vacuum that it were sucking the oil out from between the bearing and the crankshaft. So obviously then you'd have an engine failure. So, but if you can keep it all within a certain realm, I mean, try to keep it in the 15 to 20 inches of vacuum. I see no issues there. You should never have any problem with scavenging too much. John says EPA mandates. Yeah, I do believe some of it's EPA mandates, but the automotive engineers seem to always be making things more complicated than they need to be. It just, working on, being a technician for all the years that I have, it's always a saying. People are always like, the engineers, they put all this stuff around the easiest thing to change to make it a pain in the butt. Engineers don't work on cars, so you can tell by the way they where they put the components, stuff like that. There's all kinds of little sayings and stuff. But the reality is, I mean, electric steering, I understand that. That's smart, electric air conditioning. I mean, obviously they had to do that for hybrid, and they have to do it for electric cars because otherwise the components won't work. There's no crankshaft to spin the components off of. However, and besides that, anything you can take, hot rodders known that forever. All the accessories we can get off the engine or slow down just makes that much more power going to the dry shaft rather than being absorbed by the engine. But some of this stuff is a little crazy. I mean, variable displacement on demand, I kind of get. I've never seen, watching the instant fuel mileage on vehicles, I've never seen a big gain in fuel mileage. So it's a lot of components for not much gain. Maybe there's some emissions gain. However, CARB, as far as I know, doesn't check at highway speeds. So I don't know, I don't know if that would be a thing or not. The stuff that Mike's doing, I mean, that's crazy. The variable valve timing, that originally started a thing mainly for EGR. So, EGR is just exhaust gas recycling, and that's what they do. They're putting exhaust back through the intake, so you burn it again. Just like burning a fire twice. If you can get half the emissions out on the first go through the engine, well, let's put it back through the engine again and burn it again and see if we can clean up more. And it does work. So VVT eliminated the need of EGR because they can do it with valve timing. And the other gain is a much broader power range because now they can, especially on a dual cam, they can change the overlap and, you can get a broader power band. So, it is what it is, but it really crazy, the autonomous driving, the automatic parking. I mean, a lot of those things have nothing to do with cafe mandates and stuff. So, I don't know. I guess maybe I'm actually now an old timer. I never thought that way before, but maybe I'm just an old timer and I don't like change. But I just don't think that all those things are necessary. If you like the sport or you have an enjoyment of driving an automobile, why do you want it to drive for you? The safety stopping and stuff like that. I can understand that's good. You know, people drive half tired, sleeping. Of course, everybody nowadays is on their phones, so you know, I can see those being trustworthy or necessary things to add to the car. The autonomous driving, though, I don't think is a smart thing, because now you've got people getting used to driving their car, not having to drive their car. So, anyway, and Mike says he doesn't see much gain with the DoD, but it completely understand VVT cam timing. Correct. Yeah, EGR, small engine, big power band. You know, that's totally understandable. It's crazy. You know, I left a comment on Mike's channel after I watched the video, and it's just like, you know, and Mike replied, they still have 5,000 mile service intervals on these cars, but yet they've got the engine oil running all these solenoids and actuators, and I mean, obviously they're trying to make everything as small and as light as possible, so everything's tiny, and to be using this oil, you know, let me back up. It's great using the oil to do all those things. That is awesome, but they should have put an oil maintenance protocol on the engine so that it would work better. So, you know, they should be running full synthetic oils, because full synthetic will have a less tendency of getting crap and sludge and stuff in it. But the biggest thing is time. When you leave oil in a motor for a long period of time, there are combustion gas that get past the rings. I don't care how tight you have the ring package. Combustion pressures are going to get into the motor, and it's going to contaminate the oil and leave carbon deposits, and now you've got issues. Chris is on. Hey, Chris. So let me tell you a little story. This happened years ago. I would say probably when I had my old shop in Boca Raton, Florida, Street Rods and Classics. I had a customer, and the guy's an intellect. He went to college, and you know, he ran schedule books and maintenance books on his vehicles. I mean, you know, guy's intelligent. He knows what's going on. So he's driving. He's working at a family business, and he's driving a lot of mileage on the highway. So he's like, you know, I want to do something to lengthen my engine. I want to make this car get a lot of mileage in it. So it was a 83 Ford Thunderbird, had a 302 in it. So he put an Oberg oil filter on it, which I'm not sure if everybody's familiar, because Oberg isn't really around as much, but it's a sandwich style oil filter, which has a big disc screen. Moroso makes one, System 1 makes one. All the guys, if you watch Street Outlaws, you see the ones, that big filter with the glass on the top, oil's percolating, that uses the same style screen. And the whole idea of that was when you change your oil, you look at the screen, wash it out, and you can see what's happening in your engine. If you get metal in the screen, you've got, you know, bearing or metal rub, or you could have a valve shim coming apart. Who knows? But at least you get to see it before it becomes an issue. So he had that on there, and reading magazines or watching advertisements or whatever, he got hooked on the Mobil 1 synthetics back in that day, in that era, 85, 86, 87. They were advertising the Mobil 1 synthetics as a 20,000 mile oil change. The oil's good for 20,000 miles. It's synthetic. It doesn't break down. It doesn't do any of these harmful things that a mineral oil would do. So you can run your oil for a long time. So my buddy, that's what he does. And he's like, you know what? I'm not going to go 20,000 miles. I'm going to go 10, 12,000 miles. And by the way, the Oberg oil filter had a sensor on one side of the filter, so that if the pressures varied too much, it would throw an oil light on. So anyway, you know, he's a happy guy. He's driving this thing. comes by the shop one day, and he's like, my oil pressure is down, man. So we go out and look at the car, and it's got 135,000 miles on it. 302 Ford. I mean, it's nothing. And we checked the oil. It looks kind of clean, and it was full. And of course, then he told me, well, I just changed it. So I put a mechanical gauge and verified, yes, the oil pressure is low. When it gets cold, the oil pressure drops out, which means that your clearances, are getting looser. It's not that the oil pump is going bad. It's that the motor clearances have opened up, and now there's no resistance for the oil pump to push against, so then the oil pressure is lower. So he agrees. I pull the motor out of the car, and I pull it down. And lo and behold, every bearing, every rod, every crank, even the cam bearings, all showed copper. The Babbitt upper layers were completely gone. And he was beside himself. How could this happen? I've been using this Mobil 1 oil, and I got the greatest oil filter on there, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, Tony, I don't know. Let me just go through it, and we'll go through and we'll figure out what's going on. So I rebuilt the engine, and I thought about it because it was really the first time I had thought about that kind of thing. I mean, we've always changed oil 3,000 miles, but I got thinking about it, and I looked at Mobil 1's data and stuff, and it occurred to me the oil's getting dirty from carbon, from the actual burning of fuel in the engine. Carbon deposits are going past the rings and getting into the oil, and now the oil is dirty. Even though the oil is still a good lubricant, it's got trash floating in it. And the particles of carbon were probably too small for the oil filter to filter out. It's looking for larger components, sludge, metal, stuff like that. So we had a big discussion. I rebuilt the motor, and I said, Tony, I think you're better off changing oil every 3,000 miles with whatever oil you can get. Cheap, expensive, I don't care. Just change the oil all the time, and the filter. Don't leave the filter on for multiple changes. Just do it. And so he listened, and he did it, and he came back about a month later and said, I did the math, and I really didn't save anything by doing that Mobil 1 and all that stuff. It just didn't make sense. So, I think, you're on to something here, so let's go. Well, I'll tell you that I bought that car from him, I don't know, 8-9 years later with almost 300,000 miles on it. So the motor I built had 200,000 miles on it, and the motor that Ford built had 130 before it needed to be rebuilt. And in fact, I never rebuilt the motor. I gave it to my daughter. She drove it. Then she crashed it. Then I gave it to my nephew. He fixed it up. He drove it. He sold it. The motor was still going when the car left. I don't know how many miles were on it by then. So just, I kind of don't know where I went with that. But the big thing is trash in your oil will be a problem. So you always want a good oil. Oh, because of the new cars doing all this hydraulic stuff, and they're not telling the people they need to service the vehicles more often. It's crazy. So that was my big takeaway when I watched Mike's video. And for anybody who wants to see what we were talking about last week about these new engines and the crazy valve trains, go to Mike's channel, Patriot Grease Monkey, and take a look at that video. And it's pretty wild. So, Mike, thanks for doing that. John says Valvoline and Pennzoil Ultra have the best additive packages. Yeah, I like the Valvoline VR1. The big thing that hot rodders need to concern ourselves with is the zinc and the phosphate. Now, on your new oils, they took all that stuff out because those two products, when they're burned through the combustion chamber, which you're always burning a little bit of oil residue, always, but because of the CAFE standards and how much NOx is produced at the tailpipe, they decided that if they got rid of the zinc and phosphorus, that would lower the NOx out the tailpipe and make cars pass emissions better. And since most new cars, since the mid 80s, have roller valve train in them, there was really no need for the zinc and the phosphorus as far as major wear items. Now, if any of you have ever put a flat tappet cam in a motor and did not run a zinc and phosphorus oil additive, you realize real quickly that your camshaft wears out in 5 minutes. Because on a flat tappet, that lifter is a lot of load on the journal of the cam. And that was that was a big thing. 15, 18 years ago, we started wearing cams out and didn't even realize, because the oil manufacturers never told anybody, hey, we're taking the zinc and phosphorus out of the oil. They just did it. And if you looked at the can, it has all the specs, but the specs don't tell you what's in it as far as additive packages. They just say it meets GM, Ford, Chrysler, blah, 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 and they'll have some coding and stuff, which I guess if you're an engineer, if you actually took the time to look up the API, you would see that what they did. But anyway, even cam manufacturers, it took everybody, I would say 5 to 10 years to really understand why all of a sudden we're having all these cam issues. So, obviously people know now, and then like VR1 Valvoline, they put it back in. Pengrade is another great oil. The Pennzoil is good. Mario says Royal Purple. Royal Purple is an awesome oil. When that stuff first came out, we used that. In fact, in the Pro Mod I used to drive, if you look on under the playlist customer vehicles I've driven or I raced, I forget what the name of the playlist is, but there's a bunch of pictures of when I used to run the Pro Mod, and that was one that so in the alcohol blower ranks, everybody runs red line oil. But the thing was with the red line is the red line mixed with methanol. So those motors run pig fat. I mean, a Stoich on a methanol motor is like 4.5 to 1 or 5.1 to 1. So that's 5 parts of air to 1 part of fuel, whereas gasoline is 14.7 to 1. So obviously a lot more fuel. And of course it's a race engine, so the clearances are really loose. The ring packages are really loose. And so the motor fills up with methanol in the oil pan. And when my buddy Steve that owned the car, when he bought it from Jim Oddie, they said, oh, red line, that's what you run, but you got to change it all the time, because you'll see as soon as you make two passes, the oil will be milkshake, they call it, because the alcohol turns and it foams in the oil, and it actually looks like a mint chocolate chip milkshake when you're running the red line. So I was a Royal Purple distributor, so I talked to my local rep, and I'm like, dude, what do you guys have for oil, for methanol, or and he's like, dude, we got this top fuel oil that is the shit. It's the bomb. 60 weight, 70 weight. And so I got a couple of containers of that, and he goes, listen, when you run the car, run it for the weekend, drain the oil out of it, run it for the weekend. Don't change it every couple of runs. Run it for the weekend. Get your 3 qualifiers, and if you go to the finals, 4 rounds of elimination. 7 runs is what we'd usually make in a weekend if we went to the finals. And he goes, after you get it done, put a screen over top of your drain bucket and put a heat lamp shining on it, and just let it sit like that for a couple hours, and then put the oil back in the motor. I'm like, what? He says, yeah, check it out. Just try it. So we put the oil in there. We ran the 60 in the winter and a 70 in the summer. And talking about clearances, that motor ran 6.5 thousandths crank to journal, crank to insert clearance. So you needed all the oil film you could get. But we ran it, and when I drained it out, sure enough, I let the pan sit for 20-30 minutes. I didn't do the heat lamp thing, but I just let it sit, and sure enough, all the methanol came out of the oil and was floating on the top of the oil. So yes, if you put a heat lamp on it, you could push the emphasis and have it evaporate off the oil and use the oil again. Luckily, we ended up with a Royal Purple sponsorship, so we would just dump the oil and put fresh oil in the motor. But that was a really cool thing about seeing how the oils react and stuff like that. John says 5,000 mile oil change max, even synthetic. Yeah, 5,000 on synthetic I don't think is out of the question, but you just have to remember, especially as the engine ages, the oil is not the problem. It's all the carbon deposits that are getting in the oil. That's where your problem is. If any of you change your own oil, here's a cool thing to check out. Change your oil, put it in, and go to Home Depot or Lowe's, get you a 5-gallon bucket, put 2 or 3 oil changes of oil in there, put the lid on it, seal it up good and tight, and let it sit for maybe a month after the last oil change. So you got 3 oil changes in there, so you got like 15 quarts, and it's been sitting for a couple for say 4 weeks, and then dump the oil take it to a recycle center and dump the oil out, and you will be shocked to see how much sludge is in the bottom of that jug, because it'll all settle and it all goes to the bottom. So here's something to think about. Where is your oil pickup in your engine? It's in the bottom. Where's all the sediment go? The bottom. So that is where the problems go. So you just gotta find an oil that you like and run with it. I personally try to use a blend oil, and only because maybe I'm a cheapskate. I want to change my oil every 3,000 to 4,000 miles, and I don't want to do it with an expensive oil because I'm just going through it. So I'll use a blend, because the reality is, as long as the oil is clean, most oils are pretty darn good. So I mean, you see those bearing tests where they run a little lever on there and they run a ball bearing onto a wheel and see how much load and stuff. Most oils will pass that test pretty well, so it's not really that big of a deal. Another little story. My uncle was at the time was a traveling salesman for Sears and Roebuck. He did fencing and roofing and garage doors and stuff like that. And he had a Chevy Astro van. I don't know if anybody remembers those things. They were really good, except for eating idle arms and pitman arms and transmissions, owing wheel bearings. But other than that, they were good trucks. So he had 86 Astro 4.3, which is a small block Chevy, 2 cylinders lobbed off. And I think at one time we had an oil pressure switch. I misdiagnosed it, swore the valve cover gaskets were leaking. Motor had probably 120, 130,000 at the time. I pulled the valve covers off, and I was dumbfounded that the metal cast iron top of the cylinder head in the valve cover area where the rocker arms and everything were was shiny silver. Like it was just cleaned or just came out of a machine shop. Now, I know my uncle's truck, I helped him service it. On the large stuff, he did his own oil changes. So I know those were the original cylinder heads. And anyway, so we put the covers on. We found the pressure switch leaking, fixed that. He ended up selling that van with 330,000 miles on it and never had the engine apart, except for that time I took the valve covers out. Now, had been through 2 700 R4s, probably 3 or 4 dozen front wheel bearings, half a dozen pitman arms, idler arms. Those were the normal wear items on those vans. But we got talking about it, and this is all kind of around that same time when I was working with that Thunderbird. And I said to him, Mike, what did you do to keep that motor so clean inside? I know you didn't wash it. Are you running flushes in it? What are you doing, And he said, I change my oil every 2,000 miles. And I don't care. I buy the cheapest oil I can find on at the parts store, but I change it every 2,000 miles. And I was like, wow. And that's what kind of led us to this whole carbon contamination thing. He's never leaving the oil in there long enough to do that contamination. So, again, that's just food for thought. It's stuff that I've learned over the years. Now, another thing that I do, my uncle did it on his van, I do it on my vehicles, is if the engine is so your engine calls for 530, I won't go right away and put a thicker oil in there. I'll let it run for the first 10, 15, 20,000 miles of the engine's life. Always kind of monitoring oil pressure on the gauge. But as the engine gets mileage and gets wear, I'll slowly up the oil weight. So once the motor's up 150, 180,000 miles, I'm running 2050 in it. And that's just, again, to keep a good oil film between the bearing insert and the journals. That's what the motor runs on, is the oil film, not the bearing. So you want to keep a good, so I've always figured as the bearings are going to naturally get wear, because every startup and stuff, there's touchdowns in those moments, because especially in a car that sits for weeks on end, so all the oil's pretty much run down into the oil pan and everything's pretty dry. So that's one of the places where the synthetic oils are good, because the synthetic cling to metal products more so than a mineral oil will. But you're always going to get a minimal amount of wear on everything, so I always upgrade the oil to a thicker weight just to keep the film strength up. And then if any of you have ever used AccuSumps, that's another great device for cars that sit a lot, or like on the burnout car that we're going to build on the channel. You're sitting there flinging the thing around, doing donuts, doing whatever. Oil slosh is going to happen. No matter how good a trapdoor pan you put on it, it's going to happen. So road course cars, autocross, all those things, you can always get those issues. So with the AccuSump, you have a 1 quart, 2 quart, 3 quart. They sell them in different sizes, but you have a pressurized cylinder that when the pump is pumping oil, you have the cylinder. Let me rephrase that. First of all, in the AccuSump, you have a cylinder with a piston in the middle of it. One side is air, one side is oil. So as you, with the piston all the way down on the oil side and the air column at its largest capacity, you put 5 psi of air in it. Now the engine fires up, it builds oil pressure, it fills that chamber, moves the piston towards the gauge on the other end, and fills that column with oil. So then you'll see your oil pressure, the air side, the gauge will go up, because now it's got pressure squeezing that air down into a tight cavity, and that's what's creating all that pressure. So what the AccuSump does is every time the oil runs away from the pickup and the pressure drops, that air pressure pushes the piston the other way, and it feeds oil back into the engine. And nowadays, back in the day when I first started, I used to have a ball valve, so you had to remember to open and close the ball valve. It was a race car thing. But nowadays, they have them with electronic one-way valve in them, that when the valve is turned off, oil can go into the accumulator and fill it, but it won't go back to the engine. So when you turn the car off, it holds that reservoir. And so a lot of times we'll hook those valves to the ignition switch. So you turn the key to the ignition switch, the valve opens, it pressurizes the oil. Now it's not going to do it for very long. It's going to push it in pretty quick. But you can actually see your oil pressure gauge start coming up, and then I'll activate the starter and start the engine. Now the engine is starting with wet bearings every time. That's a great thing for longevity, and it's great for if you're using the car in any kind of manner that you could have oil slosh issues. heavy braking, heavy cornering, heavy acceleration. AccuSump is a well worth it piece to have. Your car will then have, if you have a 3-quart AccuSump, then your car will require 3 more quarts of oil. And you can put them anywhere in the car you want. A lot of times I'll mount them in the trunk because it's a street car. We don't want it anywhere else, So you got to run a dash 10 hose up to the engine, but it's not that big of a deal. There's already stuff going back and forth. So just another thing some people maybe never have heard of that. Obviously with Ryan and with the Studebaker and the Smurf, we have dry sump, so we just knock the belt off, put a electric motor on the pulley, and we can prime the engine to full oil pressure anytime we want to, and then put the belt back on before you start the car. But yeah, anytime you run an external oil pump, you can do that. Mike says, I'm probably the worst about changing my oil. I just go by the reminder on the dash for the wife's Arcadia and my Avalanche. I don't drive the Suburban often enough. Yeah, we're all bad at that. I'm bad at that. My diesel, I let go a little longer than I should. Of course, it does hold 10 quarts of oil instead of 5. And the Trailblazer, my wife's Trailblazer, holds 7, so that's a little better too. But yeah, I mean, if something you want to last, something you're cherishing, you just got to get on it, and put a reminder in the window. I use my little sticker maker. I got it already set up for date and mileage, and I just run a little sticker, so it's only a little 1-inch long sticker. I just stick it up in the windshield because I can't remember the last time I do it. The other thing that I do, and I've always done this from being a tech, is I always take a marker and mark the filter date and mileage and my initials when I change oil. I kind of did just at first because it was kind of fun, see if the car comes back with your oil filter on it. But eventually we started learning, hey, that's a good thing to do, and we've actually could bring it up to customers. Hey, you didn't change your oil. Oh no, I had it done somewhere else the last time. And you go, well, no, because here's a picture of your oil filter, and that's my handwriting, and that's my date and mileage when I did it last. So you're not taking care of it. So not trying to rub their face in it, but people want to say they're taking good care of their car, and why are things breaking, but lack of maintenance will do it every time. So anyway, so that's the thing. Like I said at the beginning of the show, working on a bunch of shirts for the merch store. Hopefully, I wrote up a bunch of different little sayings. Some are copies of other people's stuff. I mean, firing orders and stuff like that. But I think they're gonna be cool. Obviously, I'll wear them in the shop. I need new uniforms for the shop. Mine are getting pretty old and nasty. But hopefully, it'll be stuff that people will want. And I believe I'm working with a company right now, and I believe with this outfit that we're going to use for the merch store, you will be able to pick obviously your sizes, but also colors. So rather than me trying to inventory shirts and ship them out in a timely manner, and I'm already behind on everything I'm doing anyway, I decided to use a third party for the merch store, and that way I send them my designs in a vector file, and then they do all the printing, they do the shipping, and I know there's color choices, and I think there might even be clothing options, whether you tank top, long sleeve, short sleeve, and possibly the quality of the shirts. Cheaper shirts will be a lesser material, and the more expensive ones will be the better material. So that's all stuff we're getting going, and we'll get the OBS software out of here and the new streaming software. Oh, my wife's sticking her hand in. She's home from work. So it's gotten late again. So I guess we'll go ahead and get this thing wrapped up. But yeah, so look for the merch store opening up soon. And I appreciate everybody getting on the feed and getting in on the chat. Hopefully there was some good information for everybody. And we'll see where we get next year. Next week. I don't know if I'll have the 4200 back together by next show, because this weekend the wife and I are going up to Jacksonville Beach to see the air show. And I don't know, Mike, give me a shout this weekend. We'll be up there Saturday and half day Sunday if you want to get caught up. I don't know how far you are from Jack's Beach, but a lot of cool little restaurants and stuff. Oops, excuse me. A lot of stuff up in that area. So with that, I guess thank you everybody for staying with us in the channel. We are super close. We are less than 500 watch hours from full monetization, so that'll be exciting. Actually see a little revenue from this to where I can put back into the program. Oh, one more thing before we leave. I forgot to put on. So I joined a Stock Car Classics group on Facebook, and these guys are preserving the history of NASCAR by buying old NASCAR race cars, putting them together, getting them cleaned and organized, and a lot of them having the original livery on the cars. And they actually go to events and run them. They're not racing flat out, but they're racing like 80%. But that way people can go to Martinsville, Darlington, and places like that and see vintage NASCAR out on the track. So anyway, I got with these guys. I sent pictures of the burnout car, number 7, Phillips lighting car. We thought for sure it was a show car because we could not find any identifications on the roll cage where they were supposed to be. But these guys were telling me, a lot of these guys, it's really cool. A lot of these guys either worked in the NASCAR teams or they have friends that were in NASCAR teams back in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. So there's a lot of information there. And they said, no way, nobody in the 90s built show cars. We had so many crash cars that we would use those for show cars. We'd fix them up and put them together and they'd become show cars. They said, you got to look at, there's a couple other spots to look at for serial numbers and check it out. So I did, and found the number on the frame by the front spring pocket that this chassis was made by Laughlin Racing Products, and the serial number is 943. So I'm assuming, I'm trying to get some more information, but I'm assuming the car was built in the late 90s, or early 90s. It may have even been built when Alan Kawicki owned the team. So just an update on where we're at with that. So that's pretty cool stuff. Of course, we're going to leave it the Phillips 7 car, but that's just a tidbit of information we got. So John says, glad to hear, cool to see you getting paid back for your work. Yes, thank you. It's daunting. If any of you put videos on your channel to see what it takes to get views and to get return people and to get subscribers. I took this, I've had this channel since 2012. I would just put up random stuff every so often, probably like every 2 or 3 years. And it had some family stuff and stuff like that. But when I opened the shop here, I decided I was gonna dive in and try to see if I can make this thing go. And I kind of set a 3 to 4 year time frame. I think we're at about 2.25 years right now, and we're way ahead of where I thought we would be. So glad to hear that. And you know, it's good to see it's coming along, and it'll help because you know, simple video like that one last week. I mean, there was, you know, obviously you got your film time, then you got editing time, and then get it up on the channel and stuff. You know, most say a 10-minute video, you'll end up having 2 hours of your time into it before you can release it. And you know, when you're not getting paid and you're trying to put 2-3 videos up a week, this live show, you know, I probably have about 20-30 minutes of prep before, and that's when I'm not actually really have a lot of information to show. You know, if I try to put a lot of videos, slideshows and stuff together, I even have more time involved. So it all takes time, and I'm not looking to get paid as far as making money. I'm looking to collect money so that I can put more cool stuff on the channel. That's the whole thing. You know, I want to possibly do the sick week in February. So I mean, that's going to be, you know, I mean, obviously I'm going to have fun doing the event. So don't get me wrong. It's not like I'm not going to, but still having the car prepped. Entry fees are $500. You got to have 5 nights of hotel, 3 meals a day for you and your co-pilot. You know, all that is all coming out of your pocket. So it's a pretty expensive event to do, and then try to film on top of it and to produce a video when you're done. So, you know, that's what we're looking, just to get a little bit of stuff to get caught up. Mike says it took an hour to edit 6.5 minute video, and it didn't come out great. So I understand. It was good, Mike. You showed the points. I thought it was very good. I really think everybody should go take a peek at it. You know, it was really interesting to see what they're doing with these things. John says, you have helped a lot of people with your knowledge, and it is appreciated. Well, that's what I'm trying to do. You know, I don't think I'm going anywhere soon, but I figured it better start getting whatever knowledge I have in my little brain out there for future generations to see, and for other enthusiasts to enjoy, and maybe help them in their automotive journey. So that's why I do it. I thought a couple times about even doing like teaching or something, but I didn't want to stop working on cars. So it just, you know, and I didn't want that, you know, those who can't teach, I didn't want that. That's really not a good saying, but a lot of people use it. So Mike says, still got to learn editing. I still to learn editing programs. Yes. Shotcut is a good thing to use. It's free. It takes a little time to get used to it, but it's a pretty good system. I got it. Just like EFI tuning, though, every time you make a bunch of changes, you got to save, because if you don't and you make a mistake and it wipes the whole thing out, I did that before. I've lost 4 hours of editing a video and lost the whole thing because I wasn't saving as I was making changes. So that's my little tidbit there for saving. So anyway, it's after 8. Hope everybody has a good rest of the week. Hope to see you guys all here next Tuesday. And that's all I got. Peace out.